All right, everyone, we're going to call back to order here and switch gears. I would like to welcome everyone to the Public Safety Committee of the Baltimore City Council. I am Councilman Brandon Scott, chair of the committee. I am joined tonight to my left by Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, former member of the committee. To his left, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed from the 13th District, member of the committee. To her left, Councilman Christopher Burnett from the 8th District, member of the committee. The Dean of the Council, Councilwoman who needs no introduction, Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District. We are also joined by Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, member of the committee. We are being joined at this moment by Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District, Vice Chairman of the committee. We are also we were joined by some individuals from the Council President's office, but they have now left. Mr. Gillis, this hearing is the monthly City Council stat with the Police Department in reference to the fight on crime. Mr. Gillis, the floor is yours for now, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jim Gillis on behalf of the Police Department, the Chief of Staff, the agency. With me is Colonel Byron Conaway, who is the Chief of Investigations, as well as Colonel Darren Garrity, who is the Chief of Patrol, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Richard Worley. All three of these gentlemen are the gurus, if you will, when it comes to operations, and I will step back and defer to the real professionals when it comes to this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's going to start? Colonel, if you want to come to the podium and tell us where we are year to date as of right now, please.
That'll be.
Oh.
That would probably be a better question for
Yep.
Colonel Conaway.
Yeah. All violent. Do all part one, actually, if you can. Especially violent crime.
Bear with me for a second.
We are being joined by Kara Kuntz from the Council President's office.
All right, so as it stands right now, we're down 18.3% in homicides. That's 178 versus 218. Non-fatal shootings, we're at 370 versus 411, which is a 10% decrease in non-fatal shootings. Rape, we're down 18%. Robbery, we're down 17%. Aggravated assaults, we're down 11%. Burglary, we're down 27%. Larceny, we're down 8%. Auto theft, we're down 15%. Arson, we're down 57%. Total violent crime, we're down 14%. Total property crime, we're down 15%. And total Part 1 crime, 14%, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. And as you know, while I am, I wouldn't say pleased, but happy, at least, that we're seeing a decrease versus 2017. You know that on record that I don't think that we should be celebrating anything in compared to 2017, as it was the highest year on record for us. Do you have comparison, at least for homicides, shootings, and robberies versus where we are year to date versus 2014, for example?
No, I do not. I do not have 2014 numbers.
Can we have that sent to us as soon as possible? Let's say by close of business tomorrow.
Yes, sir, that'll be done.
Thank you, because as everyone knows that for me, while 2014 was still too high for violent crime for the city of Baltimore, it was the second lowest year on record for us, and I think that we have to measure ourselves versus us at our best, not us as our worst, as we were with last year. Colonel, sorry, you can continue if you have other stuff that you want to point out.
I think both of us can tackle it, sir.
Yep. Can we have a breakdown by district, please, of those the incidents by district, homicides and shootings and robberies?
So
Colonel, you can do it from your seat.
I want to. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to break it down again we'll start for the central, and it will factor through to the southern district. So do you want year-to-date? We can break it down through the comps that way, or I can just tell you what year-to-date numbers are.
No, year-to-date is fine. We don't have to do the week that just closed.
So in the Central District, there's been 16 homicides compared to 13 this time last year. There's been 27 non-fatal shootings compared to 35 this time last year, showing a decrease of 23% with an increase of 23% in homicides. You want everything, Councilman?
No, robbery.
Total robberies in the Central District, there's 309 this year compared to 373 this time reported last year with a minus of 17%.
Keep going.
Aggravated assault, this is 309 compared to 315 compared to 317, it's only down 1%. Burglary, 229 compared to 301, which is down 24%.
All right, thank you. And we can stop for those. Those would be the categories right there.
So moving on to the Southeast, there have been 9 instances of homicide compared to 15 this time last year with a reduction of 40%. Non-fatal shootings, there's been 23 this time this year compared to 15 last year, which is an increase of 53%, with they're showing a
Do the homicide number again real quick. Sorry about that.
So that's no problem. 9 this year compared to 15 of last year, and these numbers are through August 4th.
Okay.
Just to give us some. For robbery, which is extremely big in the Southeast District, there's been 520 this year, 620 compared to this time last year, which is a reduction of 16%. Aggravated assault, 340 compared to 393, minus 13%. And burglaries, 384 compared to 666, which is a reduction of 42%. In the Eastern District, 22 homicides year to date compared to 32 this time last year, minus 31%. 42 non-fatal shootings compared to 54, minus 22%. Robberies, 237 compared to 260, which is minus 9%. Burglary, 300 compared to 381, which is minus 21%. For the Northeast District, there's been 20 homicides compared to 22 this time last year with a minus 9. 42 non-fatal shootings compared to 37 with an increase of 14%. Robberies, 436 compared to 546, which is a minus 20%. Ag assault, 406 compared to 506, which is minus 20%. And burglaries, it is, 567 compared to 848, which is a reduction of 33%. Northern District, 14 homicides compared to 17 this time last year with a minus of 18%. 32 non-fatal shootings compared to 24 with a plus of 33%. Robberies, 288 compared to 420, which is a reduction of 31%. Aggravated assaults, 236 compared to 248, which is minus 5%. And burglaries, 411 compared to 605, which is a reduction of 32%.
Colonel, I just want to switch gears a little bit here and try to. Sorry, I didn't do it from the beginning. We'll go back and do those afterwards. So, when you look at the non-fatal shooting numbers for the Northern District, in the last 28-day period, it's showing a 500% increase versus the same period last year. Do we know what's going on there? Can you provide some detail of what's happening?
So what's happening in Northern District is they took some incidents along the York Road corridor again. It's been a thorn in their side all year long. Major Gibson actually put a really good hold on it for a while. It kind of sparked on us again, and that's basically where we're getting the increase.
What, along?
York Road corridor, going up from Green Mountain Avenue all the way up.
Yeah, that's me up until 43rd Street. All the problems north of 43rd.
Councilwoman Clark,
Yes. Sorry.
use the microphone, ma'am.
Yeah. Didn't mean to speak.
Okay. You can go to the next one.
district? I believe it's at the northwest,
That's
correct?
the only, you can go to the northwest.
Okay.
That's the only glaring number for them.
Yes, I mean, yeah, without question. And like I say, we look at these, we look at these daily and we see where the spikes are. And obviously the 6-to-1 was definitely something that raised our attention. Northwest District, they have 13 homicides compared to 29, which is a reduction of 55%. Non-fatal shootings is 42 compared to 37, which is an increase of 14%. Robbery, 292 compared to 305, which is a minus 4%. Ag assault, 281 compared to 382, which is a minus 26%. And burglaries, which is 372 compared to 482, which is a minus 23%.
Thank you. So there's a couple things that stick out to me when you think about the Northwest District, for example, and even in the seven-day period, where it's showing 12 robberies versus 5, and for the 28-day period, and that's street robberies, I'm sorry. No, total robberies, yeah. 12 versus 5, and in street robberies is 6 versus 3, so it doubled. And the same thing for commercial. Can you talk about that? Where are these happening?
I don't have the exact information on the Northwest robberies. I definitely can get it and forward it to you.
Thank you. And then also, do you know, you tell me in that same period for arrests in the Northwest, do we have any arrests for robberies?
I don't have that information. Colonel Conway might have that information.
Yeah, I only have it broken down by.
Oh, actually, I have it, gentlemen. So there was, through the same period, there was only 1 arrest for robbery in the Northwestern District. Now, of course, this is by the Northwestern District itself, which is a decrease in 100%. So what the request is from me is to follow up, especially for my colleague, I don't know, Councilman Burnett, if you want to chime in at all, for my colleague who represents the Northwest District, both he and Councilman Pinkett, to see if there's a correlation between that, first and foremost, like where they're happening in the Northwest District. Are they happening along the Park Heights Avenue corridor, along the Liberty Heights Avenue corridor on Reisterstown Road? Are they happening in neighborhoods? But also what's being done to deal with that, because that's a troubling spike for us. Councilman, do you guys, any of you, Councilman Pinkett?
Mr. Chair, is it possible for us to get the spreadsheets that y'all are looking at before these hearings? Like, it's really difficult to jot down all these numbers and really give substantive, feedback when, we don't have the numbers in front of us. I mean, I'm pretty smart, but.
Oh, Councilman, if you would like to look at them, actually, because I think you have your iPad, it's actually available. It's on Open Baltimore. The same packet that they're looking for is the packet from last week that's available on Open Baltimore.
But they can't send it to us?
Yeah, they can't send it to you too. I just took the liberty to print it out myself. Councilman Burnett?
No, I think it would be helpful to provide that information by district at that level. I think it would be useful to and also just to work with the command staff to figure out if there are patterns along specific corridors, what is being done.
I have that information on patterns. I just don't have it with me. I can tell you that the Northwest District right now, in the last 28 days, had a pattern going on with in the Menlo Drive and 6200 block of Biltmore Avenue.
That's in Park Heights.
Yeah. So I can tell you that it's going to be hard to figure out if that's a patrol. I don't know if he's looking at a patrol arrest or an arrest from my side, which is CID, on the investigation side, because we arrest pattern cases as well, and that might stretch across multiple districts. So it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was gonna say the one I looked was just the one patrol. I can't find the ones for your shop, sir. Thank you. On to the Western.
So the Western has year-to-date 24 homicides compared to 31 this time last year, which is a reduction of 23%. Non-fatal shootings, 52 compared to 74, which is a reduction of 30%. Robbery, 199 compared to 227, a reduction of 12%. Aggravated assault, 344 compared to 362, which is minus 5%. Burglaries, 275 compared to 244, which is actually a plus of 13%.
And Colonel, for both of you, this is, so first and foremost, of course, the non-fatal shootings being up 300% in the 7-day, but also that carjackings are up 300% in the 7-day. Do you guys have any more information from our colleagues on that in particular? And robberies as a total are also up 60%.
Western.
Yeah, I know we don't have any patterns to report there, and I know that there was a carjacking pattern over the weekend that we just made 2 arrests on, and I'll have to get back to you exactly what districts that cross, because I don't have that off the top of my head.
Yes, sir. Any questions from my colleagues? Councilman Burnett?
I don't have a Western.
Oh, yeah, Councilwoman, we're going to go back to the Eastern in a second. We're going to cycle back through. Councilman Costello? Pinkett? Nope, thank you. Southwestern.
So going to the Southwest District, year-to-date, 24 homicides compared to 28, which is a reduction of 14%. Non-fatal shootings, 47 compared to 55, which is a reduction of 15%. Robberies, they are at 239 compared to 336, which is a reduction of 29%. Aggravated assault, 453 compared to 428, which they're up 6%. Burglary, 424 compared to 511, and they're down 17%.
Thank you, sir. And the one glaring one for this one is actually the non-fatal shootings. Only 2 versus 1, but I don't know if we're seeing anything spike there or any particular thing. I know that Councilman Burnett is always on top of everything involved with the Southwest District. Southern
District, they are at 27 homicides compared to 21 this time last year. They're up 29%. Non-fatals, they're at 39 compared to 63, which is down 38%. Robbery, they are at 362 compared to 435, which is down 17%. Aggravated assault, 365 compared to 435. I'm sorry, I apologize. 365 compared to 485, they're down 25%. And burglaries, 428 compared to 589, and they're down 27%.
Yep, and so to start, can we speak about the homicide?
The homicides have peaked in the Southern because the Southern District has been getting hit in multiple areas of South Baltimore.
Which ones?
Brooklyn, Curtis Bay. That's where they've taken a lot of their hits. Where now that they got hit in the Tri-District, that space along the Western, the Southwest, and the Southern. It's an area that shifts on them constantly. We took a lot of hits in Brooklyn, which is an anomaly because they really had a grasp on that, and then it sparked. They had their areas to pick. She did a good job in picking some of the areas, and they're actually trending down in some of these. But it's just been a battle we've been dealing with all year long.
You good, Councilman? Thank you. And we're going to cycle back around. We know that we all think that Major Brown is great, and I'm not just saying that because her and I star in a movie together either. And that she went to Merville High School, the best high school in Baltimore City. Let's go back to the Central, sir, sorry. And we went through the numbers already, but there is a big spike in street robberies, so 14 versus 6 in the 7-day, 47 versus 29 in the 28-day, and also overall there's a 70% jump. I know that my colleague, Councilman Costello, would like to know if there are any particular patterns or if they can hit it in a specific spot in the Central District or if it's just scattered.
Yes. So we have one particular pattern, and we are calling it the MLK street robbery trend. And those suspects are approaching the victims and assaulting and robbing them of their property. We are particularly concerned with the squeegee boys because a lot of the suspects are unarmed. They typically hit on Tuesdays and Fridays. And we have one at 700 North Martin Luther King, 500 North, 200 North, 700 North, and 1100 Martin Luther King. So we are familiar with that.
And what time frame, Colonel?
We have, it's sporadic. So we have after 9:50, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 in at 9 p.m. up to about 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:45 to be exact. And then we have one at 2:30. But again, they typically hit on Tuesdays and Fridays. We have 2 on Tuesdays and 3 on Fridays. Total 5.
Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the squeegee kids have been a constant sense of frustration for my constituents. I have had my vehicle punched twice. I have had at least a dozen constituents who've reached out and had their car physically hit. Forget the inappropriate or rude behavior or dangerous behavior that's occurring. I know that probably the most problematic intersection is going to be McCullough and MLK. Is that what you guys are seeing?
So I would say between the 200 block and 1100 block of Martin Luther King.
So just being a wide stretch, McCullough is going to be, I want to say, the 800 block, plus or minus 700.
And it's also stretches on President Street as well.
Sure.
We have a big problem on President Street as well with the same type of activity.
So what's the strategy to deal with that behavior? Because that behavior is unacceptable.
So we actually met with the mayor approximately, I think, last week,
Okay.
and actually went over this. There were several groups that were brought in to discuss how we're going to deal with this problem. The central district, the major central district, is pretty much at his wit's end with this issue. One of the things that we've seen is that when we do engage these kids, and some are young adults, that the level of pushback that they give is almost like it's a criminal enterprise sometimes. It's gotten out what areas of the city are best to make money. President Street and Martin Luther King. That they're your two strips of area that are going to make you money to be a squeegee kid. They talked about pop-up car washes. They talked about, a question was asked, why can't we just arrest them? And theoretically, if we could, because there is a law that's by the city, but by the city, city ordinance about aggressive panhandling, but that is not what we want to do. We don't want to send in, and one of my peers made a statement saying we don't want to send in people with guns to deal with kids with squeegees. And there has to be a better way. I don't think this is strictly a city police problem. I think a message needs to get out about just engaging these individuals, and to be honest, people have to stop giving them money.
Okay, so I agree with your statement that we don't want to address kids with guns. That's bull in the china shop. We don't want to do that. And I can imagine that this is not just a BPD problem, but it seems like BPD is the main agency that should be tasked with combating this problem. I think you all would agree, and I assume the mayor's office would agree with that.
I would agree. I would agree somewhat, and the reason I say somewhat is because we can only do so much, and we are law enforcement, and we have officers that we're dedicating a bunch of officers on President Street, on MLK. They're on bikes, they're on foot, they're in vehicles. It's a tremendous amount of resources that we're deploying into this problem.
No, and I know that Major Gaines and Captain Featherstone, as well as, I guess he's called Area Commander Kevin Jones now,
Yes.
who used to be the major in the Central, is wildly frustrated with this situation. But I can't figure out how it's acceptable for someone to punch someone's car and stand and stop traffic at a signal. Would you agree with that?
It's not acceptable, and it should be. And I can only give you an example of where we had a young man assault another individual. The police were called. The officer responded. The victim stayed on scene. The suspect fled on foot. The officer chased him. The officer arrested him. They went to the state's attorney's office at Booking, and they would not touch this case because it involved a squeegee kid. Now, we had a complainant, and we had a victim. We had an incident where somebody stayed to make a report to the police, and it was not even sent through.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd kindly indulge me here. So you're telling me that one of the squeegee kids physically assaulted a citizen in their car. The citizen stayed after. They filed the report. Your people came down, apprehended, arrested the, I'm assuming it's a juvenile. Are you at liberty to say his age, his or her age?
I believe it was a juvenile, yes.
Okay, so let's call it 15. And the state's attorney's office is unwilling to prosecute?
That is correct.
Did they give you a justification for why they're unwilling to prosecute?
Per Major Gaines, they told the officer that they will not prosecute a case involving a squeegee kid.
So what if a squeegee kid were to do something more violent than physically assault a citizen? It's the position of the state's attorney's office that they will not prosecute?
That I can't answer if they would prosecute something more severe, but I could just tell you on this occasion that is what was said, and that was relayed to me by Major Gaines.
I was just going to say that the police department can't comment for the state's attorney's office. I don't know anything about this particular case. I do think that what the colonel is saying is that we're trying to balance enforcement with opportunity, and that is what the purpose of the mayor's meeting last week was, to find other solutions to this, including finding other opportunities for these young people who are out there.
Colonel and Mr. Gillis, can you guys provide us the date of that incident? So as the chair, I'll take the liberty of personally following up with the state's attorney's office to track down what happened.
Absolutely. I will get it to you tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I have two quick follow-ups.
Yeah,
First question is, do you think that a strengthening of or more stringent law surrounding this matter would be an effective tool for you?
I mean, we're talking about children. Some of these are kids, some of them. And I wouldn't want to say put a more strict law.
I'm sorry, and pardon me for interrupting. Let me ask the question a different way. Would stricter laws regarding assault, specifically in an intersection, specifically being done by someone who is engaging in commerce in a right-of-way intersection, would that be a more effective mechanism for you? Or would that enable you to help curb this problem more effectively?
I think that, solutions should all be talked about. This is really a question for legal, obviously, and because there already is, as the Colonel said, an ordinance that exists on the books, and so that is something that will probably be better involving legal in a further discussion.
Sure. So I would certainly appreciate if you guys would get with legal before the next monthly hearing that we have, I think September 5th, and provide a response on that. The second piece of it is one of the suggestions that I had made to Commissioner Davis at the time was sending an undercover officer or a plainclothes officer in a unmarked vehicle, and not a police unmarked vehicle, not like the Crown Vic or whatever it is that yes, the police use as their standard vehicle model these days, perhaps in a Honda Civic or a Nissan Sentra or whatever it is, to just patrol through these intersections to keep an eye out and try and observe and pick out this aggressive behavior. Again, I recognize that we cannot arrest a kid or even an adult, nor probably should we be arresting a kid or an adult who's in an intersection who's operating a squeegee and a Windex bottle and not causing harm. But I think there's a clear line in the sand that's drawn when we have people who are punching people's windows and scaring the life out of citizens.
So I have the undercovers that would be my side. I can tell you that it's the job of every police officer, regardless of assignment, to address this issue. I know this week we identified those who are aggressively panhandling and squeegeeing. We've identified different individuals within each district so that I can look at them and cross-reference them with robberies as well, so that we can prosecute and look at them on a robbery angle. I think that it's the job of every police officer to address them.
Can you tell me how many of those individuals were identified citywide?
I want to say it was a total of 9 or 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, I think we are moving them and not identifying them. So we're moving the problem, but we're not addressing them in a manner that we are taking those names. And I think that's the direction that we want to go in the future, is try to identify them so that we can look at them, like I said, in other robbery cases.
Sure. I would certainly appreciate that, being the council member who has the Central Business District, and I have all of MLK in my district. A big chunk of President Street, North Avenue, as well as Conway Street. This is a huge concern for people that live in my district and work in my district, and I field these complaints 2 to 3 times per day, Monday through Friday. So I hope to see some progress on this, because this is a huge problem. It's gone on for too long, and we really need to do something to address it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We will move to the Southeast District. And so, Colonel, as you know, we're up 100% in shootings, and of course we know that we have the incident along, and we're up 53% in non-fatal shootings in the Southeast for the year, 50% in the 28 days, 100% in the 7-day. Can we talk about what's going on? You know that my big concern right now is the activity that's happening along Crescent and up and down the Crescent corridor and up along in Conklin as well. Can we talk about, is that the only place in the Southeast District, but also what we're going to put in place to deal with those issues?
So what we've seen in the Southeast, obviously, is the incident happened at 1000 Dundalk. There was a quad that took up a lot of their that there's been an arrest made in that case. Colonel Conway could attest to that. The Crescent Street, yes, that has been an area that hasn't really been dealt with that much because of the issues the Southeast has had with robberies. A lot of their deployment has been south along the park and then south of the park to combat the robberies. Like I say, the anomaly is that quad. The more pressing issue for me is an uptick around on Jefferson, a little further up towards Monument Street. We just took a triple there during the daylight hours, and then they took another one down in Douglas. So that's a little bit more of a pressing issue because they're the flashpoints that we can hit, and then all of a sudden we're looking at 6, 7 incidents bouncing back and forth between the eastern and the southeast. But the Crescent Street, actually they were up there, as a matter of fact, the day after the shooting and got an arrest with somebody with a gun. It's an open air drug market. The mayor's aware of it. The captain's aware of it. I don't see it spiraling out of control, to say the least, but it's definitely going to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a relatively small area,
Yes.
so once you address it, it can go away forever. And I think that, I don't know, Councilwoman, if you want to talk about the Monument Street corridor at all.
So just from that, I feel like we're constantly talking about Monument. I'm always out there. It's been a concern for businesses, residents. And so, but this weekend, of course, was something that was just horrific for the community and myself to view. Haven't spoken to anyone within the district, to be honest. No one reached out, nothing, text message.
I apologize for that.
Nothing. And so, and it's funny because neighbors are saying, you know, while we've been asking in the Berea community and the care community, can we get patrols in this area? You all know about Monument Street. What about where the crime and kind of the concerns push through the neighborhood? And so,
so just to give you some perspective, and I apologize for cutting you off. Year to date on Miami Street alone, they've seized 25 handguns. That's just in that Miami Street corridor from 2100 down to 2600 Monument, 25 handguns. They are down there. They are making so many arrests. I don't have the exact number of arrests, but there's been several crews that have been identified by the agency. There's a lot of stuff that's going on that I'm not at liberty to speak about now. We understand that with the business fronts, there's a lot of loitering. There are people hanging out on the corners. A lot of those businesses are involved. We've identified a lot of them. We're sending down the social club task force to do what we can to get rid of these businesses that are cooperating. It is, without question, it's a thorn. And you ride down Miami Street any time of day or night, and you're going to see people out there. Not everybody's out there breaking the law. There are a lot of people out there just, you know, hanging out. One of the cultures in Baltimore City is people like to hang out on the corners, and not everybody's breaking the law. People will talk about making arrests for loitering and issues like that, but being that we are under the consent decree, and that is one of the issues that we came across with the zero tolerance, and we went out there arresting everybody, we just can't go back to that style of policing.
And I don't think neighbors want to see that either. I think it's a balance between what happens in the community and the relationships that, you know, that are built there. But it's just incident after incident. Like, I think the week before last, it was a video of folks selling water, young people selling water on the street, and that video was like, hey, you got to move, and it could have really escalated really fast then. And these are just like young people selling water, and I'm like, all the stuff we got going on Monument Street. Wow. These young kids, and I hear you, it's a law, you're not supposed to do it, you're supposed to have a license, but here is, and then it was, here we have it again, you know, this is something that shouldn't have happened, and I'm not out there, like, I guess we'll, you know, let the investigation go and see, but it's just out of control on Monument Street. It's
definitely a challenge.
And thank you, sir. And also, I think that while you know that the robberies, especially in the park, and then in particular also up and down the Conklin Avenue corridor,
yes,
with the Hispanics are very important to us. We also would suggest and request that resources be allocated to those other areas outside of the park as well. While those areas are just as important, we have to try to get a hold of those other areas before they spiral out of control.
Yes,
On
sir.
to the eastern. So the eastern actually looks pretty good. I don't know if there's anything in particular that's troubling to you from the eastern.
Yes.
I know Major Wells will get a kick out of me saying that the eastern looks pretty good when he sees this video.
Yeah, so the one thing that's kind of troubling with the Eastern is we just had an uptick recently with some non-fatal shootings down around Mellow Court, which then extended up onto Madison Street, which then extended up onto Caroline Street. We had a triple on 900 Broadway where an individual actually died with a double shooting accompanying that. That was roughly in broad daylight. It was right in 900 block of Broadway. So the district, yes, overall is down. This week they've kind of trended up. It's definitely a concern of mine because it's the Eastern District. I understand how that district runs, and it could flash at any time. Especially what we had going on Miami Street. We have our eye very focused on East Baltimore right now because we don't want things to spiral out of control. I just had a talk with an individual who actually is probably one of the best people out on the street I could ever run into, and I asked him what his opinion was of the street. He said everything's pretty calm, talking for the people on the street, and that's the way we're going to go with it.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, the Northeast District. Let's talk about both homicides and shootings. So we know that homicides are up 400 in the 28-day and up 200 in the 7-day. Can we talk about that?
So with his homicides being up, Major Sneed has been getting hit in areas that he just could not deploy to. He took an incident recently up on a street that
Woodley Avenue.
That we would not have police. There's just no way we're going to have police officers on the 4300 block. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 4800 Woodley. That we just wouldn't have officers, and it was something that actually didn't even concern his district.
Yep.
The other homicides, the Frankfurt incident, the Berger Avenue, which was closed, and then another shooting, which is up at 6100 Hartford Road. Like, he's getting hit in areas where his deployment is further south. It's in the Chum. It's in the 4x4. It's along Moravia because he saw an uptick in that. I'm concerned with this because the violence is tickling up, but we all went through a change in command over there as well. I think the officers are getting more engaged in the Northeast. I do apologize if Major Sneed hasn't been receptive, to anybody. That's being worked on and it will be fixed.
I'll call you in 1 second, Councilwoman. I had a feeling that you would be back for this one, Councilman.
Yeah.
So a few things. One, I agree with the general statement, especially with the Woodley Avenue and knowing the individual and knowing that block is, police officers would never have a reason to go to that block. But there have been some incidents, for example, in the 5400 block of Sedonia,
yes,
where a certain person, maybe me, said that, hey, a shooting is going to happen at 5412 Sedonia Avenue if we don't get a hold of it, that we haven't done that. But also, as you guys know, because you were copied on the email, that I think that is something that's beyond the Northeast District at this point. I think that knowing that Northeast only has, 10 discretionary officers, and we know that, and as someone who represents parts of Bella Addison and who loves Chum and also doesn't want to hear Mark Washington say that I'm taking police officers away from him, my dear friend, that is simply not enough, right? We can't take that out of Bella Addison and Chum because they have significant issues and struggles with violence and bring them up to the 5400 block of Sedonia or the 6100 block of Hartford Road. But what we can do is allot them more discretionary officers to deal with those other places. And this is a conversation that I've had with the last 3 police commissioners and on behalf of district commanders in Northeast over and over again. We know without a doubt unequivocally that the Northeast is the largest. We know that it has 20,000 more calls for service. We know that it has significantly more people. They have to be given more resources to deal with that, because when you're dealing with not even just shootings and homicides, when you're dealing with robberies and you're dealing with pop-up drug shops that pop up on a quiet block in Councilman's district or Councilwoman's district or in my district. They simply are not going to be able to take folks away from Bella Edison and Chum, because we know what happens when you do that. For example,
thinks that Bel Air Edison has got all the Chum people.
When we know what happens when you do that, but we also know what happens when you don't respond, right? We know what happens when the officer that is normally at Frankfurt and St. Clair goes to the bathroom, right? We have a homicide happen as soon as he leaves. That's what we're trying to say, is we have to have that push to give them some more outside resources to deal with those other issues that can turn typically quiet neighborhoods back into what they are. This isn't a place where you need, for the most part, this systematic breakdown of, everything else that we have to deal with. This is simply dealing with one or two houses, a few group of people, and being able to extract them and allow the community to go back. And these communities are strong. They'll be able to uplift their own communities once they're given the help.
Mm-hmm. So point taken, and that's going to be in my corner. I don't want to get too involved in a conversation about it, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware of that vacant property that's there, that's an issue, and we're going to address it.
Thank you. Councilman Dorsey, Northeast questions? Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually not sure if I want to address my problems in this public forum. Yeah, but I do need to have a serious talk with you about the command staff in Northeast. I get very consistently very bad reports, and most recently had two officers tell me, two citizens in my district tell me that they were each told different lies by different officers neglecting their duty. And the response that I got from the major was less than enlightened. So I do need to talk with you about that. But I want to put it on the record that I'm having a pretty hard time there.
Yes.
Councilman, before you came back, the colonel said that he's aware of the issue, that he'll be reaching out to talk about it.
I think that's all I feel like there's something else on my mind. All right.
Councilwoman Clark.
Well, we both are in Northeast. All are in Northeast. I have Chum and New Gardens Lakeside and original Northwood south of Argonne and the Hill and Road area south of Argonne. Let me just say that one thing that bothers me is, one, we had a good commander and a good captain, and then the commander was taken away and the captain was made the major without, nobody ever, well, they might have talked to my colleagues, they sure didn't talk to me, and there was the change. Well, it worked out pretty well. And so the captain became the major, and he had his way of doing things, but he was very user-friendly to all the people I represent in the great Northeast. And then one morning, he was gone, and he didn't know why or where, and then we had a new major. Nobody ever in all those times, and maybe it's me, picked up a phone and said, surprise, you just got a new major, or we moved. They don't have to tell me the story of their lives. Tell me there's a change, and tell my colleagues, and maybe they did. I never got any notice, so of course I'm trying to figure out who's where. And so now we do have a new major, and I have my own more positive opinions, so I'll have that private talk. Maybe we can have it at the same time. I was pleased that the new major delayed his vacation for one day to show up at on a very rainy night, on a very row house, by which I mean it could never have fit all the people that showed up dripping wet because of the murder that had occurred the night before on that block of East 37th Street. He didn't have to do that, and actually I didn't think he was going to do that, but not only did he show up, he showed up with everybody from the district. I mean, they were all there, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot to all of us, and stayed. They hung around. It was crowded. It was wet. It was great. It was great. It really lifted neighborhood spirits after feeling really bad. And my concern is with the violence that goes on. One, in the Edna Gardens Lakeside community, what we really need is a community and police plan working together, and that's why our last commander was very emaily and chatty and on the scene, young, and all those things that people feel good about. And we need that to happen there so that we can help keep that neighborhood safer than it's perceived to be at the moment. And they did make some good arrests, I think, up there. Carjacking and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is Chum. This is just my opinion. It's just a community I've represented every time I've ever been elected, all those years. It's very much a hometown drug town where it is a drug. In other words, it's not like a lot of people from a lot of different places. Chum is Chum. I'm not saying it well, but there must be a way to bring in some resources for people to be able to get really decent jobs. We don't have any community centers in the area. We don't have any place to have a job recruitment, or we don't have any place for youth work kids to sign up in that whole area. And in that whole part of the city, we really need it. And so when all those 8 o'clock in the morning meetings happen about all those violent prevention communities, we know that we know that we're not going to get those kinds of services because we don't have that level of violence. But we need something to just build on what we have and not lose it.
Councilwoman?
I'm done.
No, I was just going to also inform you that actually Chum is in the VRI zone. So it's one of the Northeast. Northeast has 2 VRIs, and Chum is one, and Bella Edison is the other.
If it is, that's news to me, and I haven't seen resources. I haven't seen any evidence in Chum. I've barely seen it in Darley Park, which is in Eastern, but it's just over the violence prevention border or something. And Chum may have it, but it's news to me, and it shouldn't be news to me if they do.
Yes, ma'am. Before Councilman Dorsey has to leave, so I'm going to let him ask his last question. Councilman?
Thank you. The annual community policing report, as required by 2015 House Bill 771, is required to be on the Baltimore City Police Department's website. It is not. I have asked for it to be put on the website. It's still not on the website.
We'll put it on the website this week. I apologize, Councilman. You have certainly asked multiple times.
Can we have not just the most recent one, which I believe is dated December 31st, 2017, but also the previous years from 16 and I believe 15?
Yes, the other one should be on there, I
15 maybe,
believe, and it's only, I think this was the 2nd or 3rd year that it's been required.
Okay, we'll get them all put up there?
Yep.
What section? You'll let me know what section of the website it's under? Thank you. Probably under transparency? Thank you.
Councilman Costello and then Burnett.
I wanted to go back to the Central District for a moment if we could. Can you give me a kind of a snapshot of where things are at on the 1500 through the 1800 blocks of Pennsylvania Avenue? I know that they're Captain Gaines and Featherstone, or Major Gaines and Captain Featherstone have flooded some resources up there. And I'm not complaining about it. Unfortunately, that's resulted in displaced activity eastbound in Druid Heights and Upton, and even reaching over to portions of Madison Park and Marble Hill.
So, I mean, obviously, that is definitely his number one spot along that area. It borders the Western District, so that whole Pennsylvania Avenue corridor. He's been getting hit actually further south on Pennsylvania Avenue in the 1000 block.
Just had a shooting there.
Yes, McCullough
2
Homes.
days ago, yeah.
And then another incident that he had was actually around McCullough Homes as well. So his deployment, without question, is on point. As far as the displacement, yes, there's no doubt that it goes over to Druid Hill. But some of the incidents that happened a while ago on Druid Hill were actually related to Druid Hill. We didn't really see much of it coming off of Pensy. We are seeing a lot of stuff that really is in West Baltimore, the Central, and some areas like that we wouldn't even expect, like Southwest, coming back to like the Bricks area of the Central, and that's definitely alarming. There was an incident going on, and Colonel Conley could probably discuss it a little more with this feud that was going on that we started over in the Western District, where on I think it was Gorman, 42 Gorman, where 2 females were murdered inside of a home, which sparked off a lot of tension throughout the city, and the Central District was part of that. The YGG 2 raw incidents, but we have run a lot of resources up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, which was discerning to me was that the shooting that we had, the homicide that we had up near North Avenue, that was further up, it was Whitelock, I believe, where the officers were there on scene, and they just completely just went at this guy, and right there in broad daylight with the police officers right around the corner. So his deployment is solid, but we are getting displacement, and it's unfortunate to say the least. It's just that we're actually, and I won't be we're being counter-surveillanced, for lack of a better term.
Sure, and I'm not a police commander, so I'm not necessarily going to suggest it's wrong. I think Gaines and Featherstone do an excellent job. I love those guys. They're great, extremely responsive. Is there any way we can get those guys more resources in the Central to deal with some of that displacement, or just start to have those discussions? Because I know that's a bit above their pay grade. They may not ask. I'm not going to be shy about asking.
It is a personnel issue. The Central District will have a Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative team. We want them to have 2 teams plus 2 DAT teams.
Does that include Western officers?
Yes,
or no?
that would include both, because it does funnel up into the Western District.
Is our boundary Fremont or Pensy?
It's Fremont.
And then it's once Fremont connects with Pensy at Upton Triangle Park. Okay.
Yes. But we don't, we erase that border completely. So when they do go over into the area, that's completely erased. The goal is to eradicate it, not move it.
Sure.
Right now, we don't have the personnel. We're trying to get the personnel. Obviously, manning patrol is number one. The discretionary resources, and like Councilman Scott asked about, just the other one, like the Inner Harbor unit, these other units, it's also necessary. It's a necessity for the city. So it is definitely it's on our radar, and there's no doubt that it's definitely on Major Gaines and Captain Featherstone's radar.
Great.
But we do, and we will give them Maryland State Police at times. Matter of fact, Maryland State Police and MTAP, they come into the city every 2 weeks. I'm not sure if you know that. And they are in the Eastern District right now on 1400 Madison, 1400 Ashland, down in that area. We were going to put them up on Monument Street prior to Saturday, but we felt that area could use a break from police presence. So we didn't put them up there because we understood, what that might signal. So we put them down there in East Baltimore, and they come in every 2 weeks, and we deploy them throughout the city.
While we're on that topic of state police, something that Councilman Scott and I have been talking about for
I'm glad that they
very long time.
They came in 6 months after we asked the governor. I'm glad that they came finally.
They've been, so Councilman Scott, they've been here, sir.
No, they announced it last fall.
Okay.
But the councilman and I requested it of the great governor last summer, and we were told that no, they will not be coming back into the city at any point.
So I want to touch on the MTA police. What's their jurisdiction around a metro stop?
To be honest with you, I I don't have that answer.
Do
I'm
you know
not.
off the top.
MTA
What's
police.
MTA police jurisdiction around a metro stop?
I don't know exactly, but I believe that it is obviously at the transit hubs, whether that's a bus stop or a a subway stop or light rail or whatever. I don't know how far it extends on either side of any of those, and I don't know what the jurisdiction is between the places too.
But we can
find that out.
Yeah,
There's
if
gonna
you
be
could find
primary
out.
and secondary jurisdiction, a bunch of different layers usually to that kind of thing.
Sure, we know that but we could probably agree that it's safe for MTA police to be within a block of a major metro hub or major transit hub such as Upton Metro Station, right?
Yes.
Or Penn North. So are we getting the resources that we need from MTA police around those areas? Because if you look at Pensy and Lawrence, I mean, that's got to be one of your top 10 spots in the city.
Yes, it is.
It's hugely problematic. What are we getting from MTA police?
I would have to get back to you and give you a better answer. I don't want to speak out of turn.
But we have lines of communication open.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
And we're not being shy about asking for resources, even if the answer is consistently no.
No, we are not. They help. They do assist us. I just don't have the exact numbers.
Right.
I don't want to give a bad number.
I just hope that those lines of communication are open and we're asking for those resources, even if they're consistently telling us no, because it's not a matter of what we're doing. I mean, you pointed it out, sir. We have a resource issue. So how do we get more resources in the area to stabilize things and get things safe?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I think we touched on very briefly in the beginning was the incident involving the officer on Monument Street. And one of the things I heard frequently at the beginning of the hearing was that this was a training issue. And from my perspective, I don't agree.
I don't think anybody from this side said that it was a training issue.
Well, I think Mr. Gillis did say that there would be more training.
Yes, definitely.
Right. So to imply that more training is needed, meaning that this could be a training issue or be interpreted as one. And one of the things that really bothered me was that that continues to be the response, that we're saying we need to retrain officers. I think we have to go further if we are or not, right? In this particular incident, there was a previous engagement with the exact same individual, and when I watched the video, it was clear that that officer snapped. What is being done to provide psychological assessments of officers that what is being done to identify officers that may have a psychological issue or may need psychological evaluations done or are overworked? I don't know how you get to that point or what situations put you in that position to assault someone unprovoked, but clearly there's more to it than just a need to sit in more training. So what is being done to identify these officers? What is being done if they are identified to have them removed or reassigned? And I say that to say that, and again, I know the council president brought this up in the very beginning. I didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on it, but I just need to know that, more is being done to really get ahead of this issue, especially when we're in a position of being under consent decree, being monitored by the federal government, being in the issue of building trust, right? We just went through district by district, a lot of issues around violent crime, robberies, and the things I'm hearing in the community is that people feel trapped, right? If they don't feel like they can call an officer, they also don't feel like that there's going to be a response. And they're also concerned that if they do call the police, two guys standing on a corner, that they don't want that kind of thing to happen as well, right? And so when we talk about solving crime and the clearance rate and reducing violence in Baltimore, you guys know very well a critical piece of that is trust. And if people don't feel that they can trust officers or trust that if they make a call that a constitutional arrest will take place, they're less likely to do it. And I had this happen. I mean, there was a neighbor on my block who said this to me, so I'm not reaching, but was concerned that there was a shooting on my block last summer. She witnessed it, and said to me, "I'm not saying anything because I don't want an officer to come and rob me." And for me, that was heartbreaking that somebody would feel like if they're concerned about violence and robberies on the block, but then also concerned that an officer may do the same thing. And I don't want to continue to beat this horse. I mean, you guys have heard, I'm sure, the media coverage is national news. But for me, if we're talking about advancing the crime fight in Baltimore City, I need to know that more is being done than just retraining officers. There has to be, more done to identify officers who may be likely to do something. I mean, we can predict where crimes are going to happen. We have criminal profiles on a number of trigger pullers throughout the city of Baltimore. We have behavior analysts that look from the outside, but what's being done to look on the inside to also predict these sort of behaviors and hold officers accountable?
So I can comment briefly. I don't have a lot to tell you, but I can tell you this, that Vernon Heron is actually our director of our health and wellness, and it does just that. It's offering help to a lot of city police officers that don't realize they need help. It also has, he has things set in place that are almost just like indicators. If an officer has certain type of complaints, just the overall attitude of an officer sometimes. It's hard to judge to see if an officer is going to get to that level, which was definitely unacceptable and just inappropriate and set us back. There is no doubt that set us back. But there is a system set in place, and Vernon Heron, he'd be the best one to really go in deeper about what they offer.
Colonel, and just to follow up for my colleague, remember that the council actually requested that the department restart via a resolution that we all sponsored, a early intervention system, which
Yes.
is what the colonel is talking about. But Colonel, and this is something that I've spoken with Director Hearn about, we still believe that it needs to go further, right? There was a time, and you'll remember, that the early intervention system meant that automatically, when you got a certain amount of complaints and a certain amount of type of complaints, you will be sent out for retraining to try to avoid these kind of incidents. And that's what I think my colleague is getting at, those kind of things that need to be put in place so that we have less of these ridiculous incidents like we had this weekend. Sorry, Councilman, continue.
Well, I mean, my request is that at the next monthly hearing that we have this individual come and
Yes,
and
absolutely.
be a part of your presentation, because I think that's something that I'd like to know more about, and I'm sure my colleagues would as well, because I do believe that this is something that we can get ahead of. I mean, officers know which ones are likely to snap. Their supervisors should be able to identify that behavior. The majors should be able to identify that behavior. There has to, I find it hard to believe that in an organization as organized, as trained, as the Baltimore Police Department, that we can't get ahead of this kind of thing and predict it and hold these folks accountable before we have another incident that puts us on the national news, before we have another citizen that's assaulted by the hands of Baltimore police. I mean, that just can't continue to happen, and you guys know that. So I would like to know more about that at the next monthly hearing.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Councilwoman Sneed, then Councilman Pinkett.
So when we talk about overtime too, is there any limit that says, you worked enough overtime, you just cannot work anymore, in terms of, hey, it doesn't look like you've slept because you've been working a whatever hour shift, and then you did overtime, and then now you want to do some more overtime because you can?
So there is a system in place that allows an officer to work X amount of hours of overtime. Theoretically, the officer is supposed to have a break that is the length of their shift in between shifts. So if an officer works a 10-hour shift, that officer is supposed to have 10 hours off, should have 10 hours off to function. As we all know, that doesn't happen. The police are, we are short. The officers are being put to every limit they can. As far as like diagnosing an officer to see if they're too tired, we don't have enough health professionals assigned to the agency to do that. I know Director Heron actually wanted to put health professionals in every district on every shift, just for that mere fact alone. But the only really thing we have set in place is the hours that are worked.
So thank you, Councilwoman. And this is not for you, Colonel, and I'm upset that Mr. Sinema is no longer with us, but more a budget thing. Again, this goes back to our point from earlier, right? When you have these positions that you know are not going to be filled, you can fill them for things that you can fill for and that are needed at the same time, right? So if we know that we need these kind of things, we have these existing positions. We don't need new money to do this stuff. You don't need to create new positions in the department. You just need to reclassify these positions that you have to do that. And this is the kind of thing that we should be doing, because look, I've said it 2 billion times that I think that there are officers who are, we're probably in violation of all kind of OSHA laws with the amount of hours that they work, and it's unsafe for them, and it's unsafe for the citizens, and it's only a matter of time before some big issue happens. That's why we're pressing to get that contract done as soon as possible. But when we can put these other things in place, we have to do that as soon as we can. Councilwoman, I'm sorry, were you done? Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to the Monument Street incident for just a second. In this particular incident, clearly it was caught on video. But I guess my question is, if it had not been caught on video, what would have been the responsibility of the other officer or officers that were there? And how confident are we that as a agency or as a department that our officers are equipped and ready to display integrity even when they see maybe another officer doing something that, is, let's just say, it's not protocol?
So to answer the first part, if it wasn't videoed by a regular citizen, we have body-worn camera footage that would have revealed it. Every officer, I would say probably 95% of the police officers that work patrol in this city are armed with a body-worn camera. This incident would not have went without notice. Okay. To your second question, what would I expect the officer to do that was there? I would expect the officer to intervene. I would expect the officer to realize that something was happening that was not appropriate, that was theoretically against the law, and step in. Is it a perfect world? No. Will that officer that was there, I don't want to comment on their actions, but I would expect every Baltimore City police officer, whether you're wearing a white shirt or a blue shirt, to do what's right.
Mm-hmm. Councilman, I can add something to that. Commissioner Tuggle has talked about, since he's been here, this EPIC policing program that stands for Ethical Policing is Courageous. I think it's been stood up and has been successful in New Orleans. Basically, the premise behind it is peer intervention with your partner, whomever you're with out on the street, so that it doesn't have to be a supervisor who is checking the other person. And your colleague, your peer is taught how to do that work as well, to try to get it at an earlier point in time.
Right, and Acting Commissioner did bring that up. I know in the meetings that I've had with him. And so, and it's a great model that he's introducing to our department. And so I just encourage that we would do more of that. As Councilman Burnett said, maybe we can address some of these issues before they escalate to this level.
And just a real quick comment, and what we do as command, we'll go out to the Eastern District, we'll talk to every roll call, we'll go out throughout the city and speak to the officers, and just kind of let them know that, what this officer did. We won't go into the nuts and bolts of the case, but we want to know what their feelings are. We want to kind of get a grasp of what they actually think, and we address this. We just don't sit back and wait for the next incident to happen. As commanders, we actually attempt to get in front of things, to get with these officers, to make them understand that, when you do something like this, not only are you violating the law, but you're just bringing down the trust of everyone in this city.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Last couple of questions before we get out of here. Colonel Conway, can we talk about gun arrests for a second? And just, do you know where we are? I think that we are up slightly versus last year, but do we?
So we are up, it looks like we're up 14%.
And what's the total? Is it, is it 825 versus
825 versus 726, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And can you break that out for us? I know you might not have it in front of you, but break that out for us by district.
By district?
Yeah.
Yes,
well,
sir.
And actually, you don't have to do it. I'll get it tomorrow when it.
I can give it to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So Central District,
Yep.
74 versus 83 this year. Southeastern District, 55 versus 52. That's a 5% decrease. Eastern District, 72 versus 109 this year. Northeast, 74 versus 75. Northern, 37 versus 60 this year. Northwest, 55 versus 61. Western, 56 versus 63. Southwest District, 81 versus 75. Southern District, 56 versus 68. And I would challenge these numbers just a little bit, only because if you were transferred but still under the auspice of patrol, the number is going to go to another district or vice versa.
Yes, sir. And thank you. And can you go through the clearance rates real quickly?
Yes, sir. So 52% for homicides versus 56.9. Robbery clearance rate is close to 20% versus, I believe, 37%.
Can we stop there for a second?
Yep.
So it's 20% this year, correct?
Correct.
Versus 37. What's the national average for robberies?
National average for robbery is going to be,
Year to date. And those are year to date numbers, right?
yes,
Yep.
29%, 29.6.
29.6. So we're below the national average for
Yes.
robbery clearance. And what's the national average for homicide clearance?
59.4.
So we're below that. And you haven't got to non-fatals yet. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
non-fatals.
Yep.
So non-fatals are, I want to say 19%, but we're fluctuating between that 15 and 19%, depending upon how many cases we get per day.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like we shoot up to 20% and we shoot back down to 15%, depending on the day.
And what's the national average? And what was last year?
It's hard because they, other
Classification.
jurisdictions might count aggravated assaults.
Assault,
Yeah. so it's-
okay.
Yeah.
And where we were at last year for non-fatals
Non-fatals.
at this time? I think it was
I wanna say
37%.
we were at 37%.
Thank you. And just for because we know the robberies are a big thing too. Have you guys heard from either the detectives or even victims of why we're clearing less of the robbery cases?
So that's my push. Of course, we've discussed this before. Robbery drives out crime here in
Yep.
Baltimore because it can go either way. It can lead to a shooting. So it's definitely a concern of mine. I know that some of the personnel there has changed a few times. We also have fluctuated in a number of investigators that we have there as well. The same for non-fatal shootings. We were down at one point to 19 investigators. I just bumped that up to 30. So I can see the dividends that's paying off there. I'm also focusing on the clearances for the robberies as well, because as I can see, it's definitely, it dipped. It's going back up. But what I did was, I know Lisa Robinson was in charge of shootings and robbery, and I thought that was just too much. So she's now focusing just on robbery, and Milton Sneed is now the major of non-fatal shootings. So I think by the end of the year, we should see some dividends paid off from that.
The good major is a much better detective than he is a quarterback, so I think that we'll see more improvement there. And
Yes,
as you know, I know robberies are almost the most. We're not putting aside homicides and shootings, but like you said, we know where there's robberies, there will be shootings and there will be homicides, so we have to track them and get a hold of them. Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What was the homicide clearance rate for all of 17? Wasn't it around 56%?
Yeah, it was around, so it's 56.9 this time last year.
Oh, but I mean for the entire year of
For the
17.
entire year, I want to say it was around 58%.
Okay, and wasn't that a significant jump from the previous year?
Yes.
We were at 35?
Yep.
Okay. So things, at least in the homicide rate, even though it's down a little bit, we seem to be moving in the right direction consistently over a year and a half, 2-year basis.
Yes, sir. And that's definitely to the credit of Chris Jones. I know that we've also looked at cases that are exceptional clearances. So individuals that maybe have identified that are now deceased in other cases. Also, we're looking at indictments. So if we indict someone and they're in jail for 30 years, then we count that as an exceptional as well.
Sure.
Thank you. And as we close, everyone, and I don't think that there's no one set up to testify. I just also want to point out, Colonel, as we know, I spoke about it earlier, and having that 2014 data, but also, though we're down from even last year, I am concerned that in the 7-day non-fatals are up 67%, but also that homicides are up 11% in the 7-day, and we are seeing we're even in the 28-day with homicides, and that we are up 2% in non-fatals. I think that it's important that we get ahead of that now so that we don't see things spiral out of control. And also would just like to point out for my colleagues' benefit, I was able to go and pull one of the old CompStat packets from around this time. So as of today, we're at 178 homicides through 8/13 per the commanders earlier. Through 8/16 of 2014, we're at 133 homicides. So it shows you how far yet we still have to go. And we were at that time, today we have 370 non-fatal shootings. At that time, we had only 224. Robbery total at that time. This year, we've had 3,005. At that time, robbery total, we had 2,086. So while we are seeing improvement on last year, we still are light years behind of the pace that we were just 4 years ago. We have a lot of work to do, because when you're measuring yourselves to be successful, you have to measure yourself versus your best, not at your worst. And last year it was definitely at our worst. With any other questions from my colleagues? With that being stated, this hearing will reconvene and be in recess. Oh, sir, you want to testify? Yes, come on up. You didn't sign up now, you know. But you my man, so you good. Come on. State your...
How's it going, everyone? Just a quick question I was thinking. Do you think it would be better if the Baltimore Police Department recruited more city residents? Do you think it would make a difference?
Yep, and this is something, sir, that I've spoken to them about and that we've started to work on, actually. So, for example, this council asked, almost 2 years ago now, for us to restart the cadet program, which they have done, and which recently the mayor has added into an apprenticeship. And the focus on that, we asked that it be our Baltimore Youth Police Explorers, which most of them are actually city residents. So for my money, the best way to improve the police department and its relationship with the community is to start to home grow our police department, right? Like the gentlemen that are sitting before us today. And the way to do that, I don't know, Colonel, you were a cadet, right?
No, sir.
No, sir. You were, yeah. I know one of you, Colonel, was a cadet. So when you start as a young person, for example, and the next phase of that, yeah, such a long time ago for this gentleman, but such a young age, and we think that the next phase of that, to me, is that we have to bake that into our school system. So actually, in the coming weeks, the police department is going to be meeting with some of the high schools. For example, Mervo has a public safety program. Why don't we have a track that teaches they can go into pre-law and all these other things? Why don't we have in a high school where young people who are already self-identifying that they want to be in criminal justice can go in and learn, you know, the ways of being a police officer, and immediately upon graduating, they can go into the cadet program. And even if we're producing 30 or 40 of those graduates a year, we know that we're going to hire 30 or 40 police officers. And that's the best way that we think to do that. And they also have specific targeted recruitment that they're doing in the city. And we think that all of that together, in addition to improving the relationship with the police in the community will help to foster that. But I think that we have to start to instill that in our young people and grow them from the bottom up into the police department. Because if you tell a 18, 19-year-old person straight out of high school that they can make $30,000, right, and go into a police cadet, they're going to take that, right? Especially when you think about, for a lot of young people in Baltimore, that's life-changing money for them and their families.
Right now, until we get there, my understanding, we're about 79 or 80% of Baltimore City police officers do not live in the city. Before we get there, does the police department have any type of cultural public relation training? Because a lot of the kids coming that's on the police department that's coming in the city with the stereotype, and so that I think that's important, the culture and public relation training. Do they have that?
Yep, they have that, and actually I am upset that she is now left. So that happens in multiple different ways. So they do have a part of the academy where, and I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on it, where they learn about the culture of Baltimore and those other things, but also something that I helped start a few years ago. They now go through youth dialogue training through community mediation, both in the academy and in patrol, where officers are taken and they spend 2 days of training with young people from the city and trying to build a relationship, but also better understand each other and their culture. So that's something that's run through community mediation in Baltimore, and that's something that's being expanded. It started with just in the Northeast District. Actually, Colonel Worley and I actually helped start this when he was my district commander, and now 500 officers a year are going through that program, and we're looking to push more and more of that into the department as well. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. With that being said, this hearing is in recess until Wednesday, September the 5th at 5:05 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Please quickly clear your things so that everyone can go home and get dinner.